Very good afternoon to everyone present here. It's my honor and privilege to introduce or probably start with a discussion on these two major books published by Tsering sir. So before we actually go into the books, I really wanted to share a little bit about Tibetan diaspora in the sense, if you're able to understand this, I think this will help us. If you read these two books, if you're able to understand the context or if you're able to understand the background. So I'll just explain or Tibetan refugees or in the sense Tibetan diaspora, how it was started and then evolved and then how have reached till now. So the concept, Tibetans have probably came to India. I think India and Tibet has lots of similarities. As we proudly say, the Tibetan script came from India. The first Tibetan king came from India. I think the Buddhism, the religion, the Buddhism also came from India. And in the process, I think the historical relationship between India and Tibet has lots of similarities. And then probably by end of 1959 and the beginning of 1960s, Tibet was occupied by the communist China. And probably His Holiness Dalai Lama left Tibet, unwillingly left Tibet, and then reached India in the 1960s. Initially lived in Mussoorie, Dharamsala for several years, and from there it shifted to Dharamsala. So Dharamsala is a central or the probably important, that's what we also sometimes call them as a Dharamsala as a Little Lhasa, sir. So where His Holiness lived, and then we have our own central Tibetan administration in Dharamsala, where the Tibetans in diaspora as a large were somehow monitored, not exactly monitored, but looked after, and that's how it's also a kind of our representation. So that's what we call them as Central Tibetan Administration. And then slowly, in the early 1960s, the initial Tibetan have reached into two major settlements, which you'll find in, currently you don't find the traces, but you can go to places like Assam and West Bengal. There's a place called Buxar and Mismari, where early they started living, and that's because of climatic conditions and they are not able to live. And then because we Tibetans are from high altitude, and then if you look at the climate and geographical locations in Buxar and Mismari, they were very hot. And then the people, I think many people have died there. And then from this, I'm just explaining how it has evolved, and from it's moved into the road construction. Most of the hilly areas, Manali, Kullu, they started working on road constructions. And in a process of building, I think, major road, you'll find them from Ladakh to Manali, so initially built by Tibetans. And then His Holiness and Pandit Nehru and Government of India, especially His Holiness and Central Tibetan Administration, really wanted to preserve what we try to discuss in this book, culture, identity, which is, I think, why we are here in India. Basically, we wanted to preserve our culture, tradition, and especially our own, or probably when we say culture, tradition, it basically comes from religion. So I'm not going to speak much. I think Sir has to speak more, but I'll just give you the context and background. And then from road construction, His Holiness have requested Pandit Nehru to have, I think that's for me as a second generation, third generation born in India and schooled probably in Tibetan schools, has played a major role in preserving and protecting my own identity. And His Holiness has requested Pandit Nehru several times to have separate settlements for Tibetans and separate schools for Tibetans, so that we can preserve our own culture, tradition, and belief system. And probably certain way it's because of 1962 happened and lots of changes happened in geopolitics. And then finally Pandit Nehru has written a letter to all the chief minister of that period. And then the first, it's always the first state to accept the Tibetan settlement is Mysore state. And that time we don't call them as Karnataka, it's Mysore state. And the chief minister is Nichalingappa at that particular period. And then we have probably in the first Tibetan settlement started in Karnataka. And that time we call them as a Mysore state. And from this The 5 major Tibetan settlements are located in Karnataka. I think it's the biggest one is Belokope, which is close to Mysore and Kushalnagar. Then we have Mungkot, which is Hubli. Then we have Hunsur, then Kolekal. These are the 5 major centers. And when we, I think this book also mentions, sir, has given lots of information on this. When we say identity, culture, I think Tibetan settlements played very important role in preserving, protecting, because we have lived in a common environment where we practice our culture, tradition, belief systems, and that's how even after 60, 65 years, we are able to preserve, protect our own culture identity, and that's mainly because of the support which this country has given to us. I think that's probably, that's what we say. His Holiness also says, Dalai Lama says, we all are products of rice and dal. And I'm also somehow product of Idli Sambar, because from 2008 onwards, 2005 onwards, till up to 2025, I was in South India. I did my colleges and university in Chennai, working here in Bangalore for last 10 years. So I've seen lots of changes evolve, happen in the process. And that's what now currently we have more than 45 Tibetan settlements across India, starting from Ladakh till up to Karnataka. So that's also one context I'll try to. And then I think another one major important context we need to understand here is schools. I think schools and education system, I believe that education played a major role in, I think, uplifting people. And that's what His Holiness's vision, then Tibetan people followed. And that's to have a separate school for Tibetans. And that's what the school called Tibetan Children's Place started in 1960s with 15, 20 who were initially lived in road constructions, and then from this moved into settlements, and from settlements we started collecting. That's what, and now probably TCV has more than 8, 9 schools across India. And I think I'm the product of that education system, and I was somehow able to understand my culture, tradition, belief, and mainly because the education I received from those schools. And I think I was able to also maintain my memory of Tibet, and mainly because of the settlements we have in across India. And that's how I think, like me, there were many Tibetans across, and that's what I think it's important to. And but with the second generation, third generation happening, lots of things change, evolved. I think, and that's, I think we'll discuss more into this book when we probably discuss about this book. And I think Sir is and also one of the most renowned writer, and I bring I think faculty or an individual who studies on diaspora, and there were very less books on Tibetan diaspora, especially in English. So I really want to thank you, sir, for writing this book. And I have been through this book, and it gives me, I think, flashback, my own reflections, how I lived during my younger ages, younger days. So if you happen to buy this book, I think it gives you lots of I think information about Tibetan communities, Tibetan diasporas, how it has been evolved. And we proudly say, we Tibetans were considered, probably many writings were there, like one of the most successful refugees. That's, I think, with the 2-3 reasons. That's my own understanding. So I think Tibetan settlements were there, and then also separate Tibetan schools were there, and certainly because of our first generations who have came to India, built up the entire settlements, and they worked very hard, and that's how it has been probably able to establish. And in a process, sir has mentioned in this book, the process of memory, imagination, navigation, it's very hard. I can share certain experience I have been through in later part of this book. So I really don't want to say much. I've given you the context or the background, how Tibetan settlements, Tibetan schools, and how we are able to preserve, protect our culture, identity till now. So I think probably we'll start with a few questions, sir. Or sir, you wanted to say something before?
No.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just ask few questions. I think, firstly, thank you so much for writing this Little Lhasa, and this basically is a book depicts about the difficulties experienced by in terms of probably identity, in terms of culture, in terms of memory. So I'll just request Sir to, I think Sir has two major books. So the first question I really wanted to ask is, Sir, this one is friction, one is non-friction. So what are the two major differences you can see within these two books? Or do you have a different process of writing friction and non-friction? So Sir, you can explain us, that will be kind.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for talking about my books and also being my interlocutor today. That's a very good question. I think it's really two different ways of writing. When you write non-fiction, for me it's slightly easier because I come from kind of a journalistic background. I was a reporter, trained as a reporter, so I don't have to worry too much about the voice, and also the form becomes less of an issue. It's more straightforward. And then you can interview people, and then you also add in reflections. So that the non-fiction, the essay, is an incredible form that allows you to breathe and reflect and do many things, really. So the novel is a bit more challenging, so it takes longer, especially in my case, because you have to worry about the voice and and the characters, and so there's a lot more imagination, so it's very in a way meditative. So in this novel that I wrote, it's not like a straightforward linear kind of a narration. It actually circles around, so it's like a mandala. So that's the two major differences.
Okay, Sir, thank you so much. I think that's one question. Another question I really wanted to ask here is, Sir, when we say Tibetan diaspora, one of the major things which you have used in this book is themes and concepts like memory, identity, imagination. So in a process of writing this, Sir, what are the major challenges or difficulties you have faced or in a process of writing by using those themes?
Yeah, I think the main reason I wrote this book is because I have this memory, of Tibet. So I was moving so fast into the future that I was almost forgetting my childhood, that I'm becoming almost less of a Tibetan. So that's, I think, a challenge that the Tibetans, especially who were born and brought up in India or away from Tibet, would face eventually. So it was my kind of attempt at rescuing that memory and kind of preserving it, and also trying to reimagine that my experience of my childhood, like my parents' generation especially. So the memory and the identity, and these are all central to the book, really. And I think it will be very important in the future because we are moving further and further away from our homeland, Tibet. So what will happen is that we will be forced to rely on imagination more than memory, because we will not have that memory. So as Ngawang said earlier, the settlements, that India, our culture in India will become very important in the future. So that helps preserve that memory, the imagination, the culture, and also the Buddhism is going to be very important, and the language, the Tibetan language. So these things are going to be very important. So that's why I wrote the Little Lhasa. When you read it, it's as if it's the language so simple, I'm almost writing it in Tibetan. It's like translated into English. So I'm not like really writing, the English is just a medium to say something very Tibetan. So that's why you'll see the language is almost, not there. What you see is the Tibet, the memory of Tibet, the imagination of Tibet. So that I think is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Tsering La. I think another things when I went through this book, Little Lhasa, as you mentioned, it's very simple. I think language is very clear, and I was reading this, and in some of the feelings I had is, sir, you have a particular reason why you have started writing this in a very simple, plain way, so that people get able to understand this, or this is a particular format in literature.
Yeah, I think I'm also influenced by my background as a reporter. So basically you're writing for, like the kids, the people who are not really like intellectuals, So I'm not trying to talk intellectually. What I'm trying to do is convey, or I'm just a medium to convey something larger. So especially in this case, the Tibetan experience, what it means to be a Tibetan, how it feels like to be a Tibetan in this world. So the language, I intentionally, I write in a very simple language that, and this is something that that I think is makes my writing very different from, say, a foreign or foreign writer writing about Tibet.
Okay, sir. These are the, I think, the major questions I have. But, sir, if you have a particular memory or particular things which you felt it's very important to share from these both books, what?
Yeah, I think the Little Lhasa is a non-fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So it uses Dharamsala as kind of a mirror to reflect on the larger Tibetan diasporic experience in India. So by reading these essays, you will get a really good understanding about the Tibetan people, the Tibetan culture, not just the Tibetans, but also the people who are not Tibetans but are attracted to Tibetan culture and has become part of the Tibetan diaspora. So I write about that experience as well, and in the interviews that I did. So Tibetan Suitcase is a bit more, for me it was a challenge because I'm trying to do something fictional, but so for readers it takes a bit more of an effort, So if you are willing to invest that time and energy, then maybe you will get something out of it. So it demands, it's a bit more demanding for a reader than, say, non-fiction like Little Lhasa.
Okay, sir. Then we'll come to the part of identity, which is, I think, as I said earlier, it's played a major role, or probably one of the major reasons, specifically having separate settlements for Tibetan and separate schools for Tibetan. And do you see, I think, sir, you have seen from the beginning of Tibetan, sir, not exactly beginning, but you have seen from the beginning and till up to now. Sir, you have observed on any particular major changes happening within the Tibetan settlements or within the Tibetan diaspora. If you can, I think many of things are mentioned in this book also. So can you please reflect on the major changes which you have seen when you're growing up in the exile or probably in diaspora?
Yes, I think Tibetan diaspora is changing very fast, and I've just published an article in a magazine, a Korean magazine, about last year, and I did some research on the Tibetan diaspora in India, And I found out that nearly half of the Tibetans have moved out of India to West and to North America and Europe over the last 10 years. So that's a big number, you know. So what's happening is that the Tibetan diaspora is moving from an exile, what we would call an exile, to a diaspora. So it's become more global. So in 20 years, there will be Tibetans like Australian Tibetans, Canadian Tibetans, American Tibetans, and other Tibetans. So that's a major change that we are seeing. So the challenge is, how would you preserve the Tibetan identity amidst this rapid change? So is it through language? Is it through our religion? Or through political activism? So I think these are the major issues that people will face, and I think there's no straight answer.
Okay.
So I think I see the many important factors like Buddhism playing a very important role, because Buddhism is not just a faith, but for Tibetans it's a kind of a civilization, you know, it's a legacy. So that will be one of the more important things that will help tie the Tibetans together in the future, especially the second and third generation.
Okay, sir. I think I'll just add on few things which I have observed in last probably decades. The Tibetan settlements, the Tibetan population, when we try to understand demographics in diaspora, specifically in India, as I said before, and many of things I mentioned in these books also, saying that Tibetan settlements, when we say culture, memory, imagination, Tibetan settlements played a very important role. As Sir said, also the Tibetan separate school, having a separate school for Tibetan, played a major role. And also, I think government of India and Karnataka is kind enough that we have monasteries. I think the Karnataka is a state where you have probably the two biggest monasteries we have in India. So those played major important role in preserving, protecting, and in the sense, probably when we look into the Tibetan culture tradition, the religion played a major role in when we talk about culture, belief, idea, philosophy. So I think that's what monastery is. So what I felt in, which is also I feel sad probably to explain this also. I think as Sir said, lots of transmigration happening, migration from India to the West. Specifically towards Europe and USA, Canada. I think we can't stop them, but I think if this transmigration continue for another 20, 15 years, there'll be a huge identity, I can't say crisis, but there'll be a huge identity dilemma. If you look at the assimilation process, if you go to any foreign country or stay there, you don't have a settlement per se, like Tibetan settlement in India, like India in Karnataka. So almost all of them are scattered across. And I have my own family members who were living in USA and they have kids. And then kids probably not able to speak Tibetan. And I have also wanted to share this. I have probably interview few people about diaspora and certain things, and then concept of homeland, which is very important to preserve, navigate, and to probably identity and all this. So I have asked this question, and I said, probably the second generation who were born in USA, and I said, can you imagine your homeland? They were not able to imagine, and they mostly imagine USA. And I also have one case, the Tibetan who lived in Karnataka till up to for a longer period of time, and at the age of 1920 he left USA. And I asked him, can you imagine Tibet, homeland? He started imagining India, Karnataka. So that's, I think, probably with the passing of generation, the first generation who have built those settlements were able to imagine homeland. The second generation were a little bit weird, but third generations were probably very difficult. It's not exactly their fault. Lots of changes happen. So I think, and then lots of migration happening towards the West. I think if we really wanted to preserve, protect, or probably identity, culture, religion, and all this, I feel, my own experience, we should stay in India. I think this probably, we have settlements, we have schools, and then if you look at it, the demographic numbers in schools and Tibetan settlements are declining. And then I think this is a major, Sir has written in this book. So I think that's also plays a major, something which we have to discuss, or something which we have to understand. So we try to understand what are the factors which leads to the identity dilemma, identity crisis. And also I think from our Central Tibetan administration side, they should have certain coping mechanisms. And then if they were not able to bring coping mechanism, I think the Tibetan settlements will slowly die down. And then also schools will die. And if this happen, and then it's like probably the reason why all the Tibetans are here in India is it's probably everyone don't want to leave their home. I have not seen my mother for last probably 30 years, and she had passed away last 2 years. But I don't have any contact with her for last 30 years. Like me, there were so many, I think many of those were written in this book. I'm just one case study. Probably I have not met my mother. She left back to Tibet in 1995. And after this, hardly we have a conversation. And if we have a conversation next day, 2-3 days after, or maybe next day, the police will be in my mother's house. And that's the situation we have, and probably we face. And we can go back, but where we don't have our probably place to practice our own religion, tradition, belief, culture. And then if you look at the present situations in Tibet, compulsory boarding schools were there. And these are the assimilation process. And the assimilation process in Tibet is so high that now children are taken away from their parents forcefully. And then forcefully, they were asked to put into the boarding school. And those boarding schools, they don't have, probably they don't teach Tibetan. And when the kids go back to the home, probably during the holidays, they don't speak Tibetan. So what I worried about here is the situation, the political situation, the assimilation process happening back in Tibet, and the changes happening in India. And if this continues, I think it's something which this particular sir has mentioned in this book also. It's something which we need to probably as a Tibetan need to worry. I'm probably, and I'm also trying to figure out, or probably doing something research on this particular area. What are the factors or reasons which leads to the identity dilemma? And also started working on what are the coping mechanisms should come with the CTA, Central Tibetan Administration. So I think these are the things probably I just can add it up. And then, sir, another one probably I really wanted to ask here is, Tibetan writers, authors, they don't earn much in the sense like that's difficult. If really wanted to work only on writing and publication, it's a little bit difficult because they don't have a huge market also. And sir, what motivates you to write those books, and what are the major reasons of writing these two books?
Yeah. I'm looking for a job, by the way. Just kidding. Just joking. No, I don't know. I was started off as a journalist, you know. So I wanted to do, like most ambitious journalists, after a few years, they basically want to write a book. Journalism is a good excuse to be a writer, you know. You can get away with it. So. And that's why I wanted to write, and then I freelance and I write about business, I write about finance in my day job. So this is like something, it doesn't pay me anything, not much, nothing really, but it's my passion, it's what keeps me going. And when I feel very depressed, I go home and read my own books, and I feel really good. And I tell myself, well, actually, I'm not bad. So, so that is what motivates me, really.
And my understanding of having these kind of books is, I think, which somehow history was written, and these kind of books, and when we say Tibetan courses, Tibetan history, Tibetan narratives, Tibetan cultures, I think these kind of books, especially Little Lhasa and Suitcase, was written in English, and then those who read English, I think Sir was able to reach out to larger audience. And through this, I think at this stage, where probably, what should I say, war is not a solution. Definitely, for me, it's not a solution. If you look from any point of way, or probably any. So how we can do here is, I think these are the very, very powerful mediums, I feel. Writings and books are very, very powerful mediums. Through those books and books like this, Little Lhasa has probably able to reach out a larger audience and able to understand the process, how Tibetans has established in India and how they have evolved and what are challenges and difficulties they face. And then once a person is able to understand Tibetan history, culture, and then hopefully, probably in future, they're able to support in whatever capacity they can support. So I think in this way, I think the books also played, and also books played very important role in the forms of publicity, in the forms of creating awareness about Tibetan issue. So, and that's what I think also these, especially the Little Lhasa, I have read it, and then I was in between, middle of the books, I started getting emotional also. And if you read this book at the end, there were certain interviews were there. I think how probably Dharamsala is also known for, I think, Little Lhasa, what we call them as and sir, most of the books were somehow based on this. And Dharamsala is also where you see lots of people coming from across the world. I personally feel, I lived in Dharamsala, somehow experienced it, that one of the major reasons that many of the people come to Dharamsala is to study Buddhism. And then also one of the major reasons many of the people across the world come to Dharamsala is to have a darshan or visit probably His Holiness. So one story Sir has written in this book, one guy from Pune has probably has a faith in Dalai Lama, wanted to meet, and how he was able to meet. His probably entire life changes after this. So if you happen to this also, I think it's one of the major, what we call them as impact Tibetans probably living across India has created on host country, or probably the host region. So that's also one interesting part which you see at the end of the book. Sir have interviewed certain political prisoners, interviewed certain of the Tibetans, probably Indians, who have reached Dharamsala and probably somehow has an opportunity to meet Dalai Lama, and then lots of things changed later part. So that's also, I think, another important part of this particular book. And
there's also, I interviewed a writer, a Tibetan writer in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the book, you will see the struggles of being a Tibetan writer. So it's really not easy, There are a lot of writers in Dharamsala and elsewhere. They don't make much money. So I've interviewed him here, how he's struggling. And actually, the Tibetan Suitcase, the novel itself, is a story about a struggling writer, and he goes through a struggling Tibetan writer and his transformation. I trace his journey, his path, and how he changes through his journeys. So that's something that I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Okay, sir. And then few things probably we wanted to discuss here is, since we are in Bangalore, we are in Karnataka, so wanted to discuss a little bit about things Tibetans living in Karnataka and Tibetans living in Bangalore. Sir, you wanted to share something. Since you have lived in Bangalore for some time, what are the difficulties, what are the challenges we face? And I'm happy that some of the Tibetan students are here. So I think I'm also happy that they have also probably later, but they can also share their experiences living in Bangalore as a Tibetan. I think that's also, sir, can you share your experiences?
Yeah, I lived in Bangalore for like, I think 3-4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to try Bangalore because it's very famous for its economy and as a technology hub. And my initial goal was to interview some Tibetan youth, and but that got disrupted because of COVID, and also my father was unwell, so I had to go back. So I actually wanted to do some stories on Tibetans in Bangalore, and actually interviewed some young people in Bangalore, and it was quite fascinating, really. What they told me revealed a lot about the challenges that Tibetan youth will face in the future in terms of their identity, And I interviewed a young Tibetan. He said he doesn't really believe in Buddhism, and he doesn't believe in the government in Dharamsala. Mm-hmm. So, and he's very skeptical, and he wants to be like a kind of a modern Tibetan, So I thought stories like that are quite insightful, and it shows. Reveals a lot about the direction that the future Tibetan, especially the young people, would face,
Thank you, sir. Since directly related to this book, basically themes around it like imagination, memory, identities, and all this. So directly related to this book, I'll share certain experience in living in South India from 2005 to almost more than 15-16 years I've lived. So kunjo Tamil pesala, selpa Karnataka. So basically what I'm trying to explain in the process here is lots of what we call them as a dual identity emerge. Sometimes it's very confusing for me. Where certain places where people start, where are you from? Are you from Northeast? Are you from Manipur? Are you from China? And then I have to explain. And then this is probably happens to me many times. And this is probably major challenges we face as a Tibetan. And then first we say Tibetan. And for them, where is Tibet, they'll ask. And then we say Dalai Lama. And then, they say, that's what I think, somehow I also feel that Dalai Lama is synonymous with Tibetan. And probably, and that's what fact, it's reality. And probably these are the challenges we face. I think, especially in colleges I have been to, it talks about, probably first time I was in Loyola College in Chennai. And the professors used to call me Dalai Lama. And that's probably, I used to explain, sir, this is that, and then it's also, so I have been explaining to people. I have been explaining to people when I book Uber. Probably when I go through autos, when I go through probably metros and all this. So like me, there were many Tibetans living in Bangalore, but number of Tibetans living in Bangalore recently, I think, has declined. Probably earlier in 2010, earlier, there were more than probably even, we can say 1,000. But now number has came down to probably 500 at max. And because of the migration happened, and especially, and the people who lived in metropolitan cities also face lots of challenges, difficulties, and then they have to navigate through all of this. And then sometimes it's also frustrating, very, very frustrating. And sometimes you feel lonely. Sometimes you feel like I doesn't belong to any part of the world. Sometimes you feel like probably what should I do? When we say wanted to go back, there's no hope, there's no chance. So these are the difficulties, but somehow we able to overcome all those challenges, difficulties, I personally feel is having those settlements, having those Tibetan schools. And then if this goes down, and especially in Karnataka, is probably where the first ever Tibetan settlements are here, the 5 largest Tibetan settlements are here, and Bangalore being a metropolitan city, the quite amount of younger generations are working here. So I think it's probably Karnataka as a state and Bangalore as a metropolitan city played important role. But as Sir's mentioned, right, the younger generation who are living in city, they face lots of identity dilemma, identity, probably, I don't know, crisis is the not like right word, but dilemma definitely they face. So I think I remember this Tenzin Gyatso, if you, Saras mentioned also, right? Tenzin Gyatso has written lots of probably poems on what are the difficulties and challenges Tibetan living in India and probably also across India have faced, right? Every time we meet, we have to explain probably, and sometimes he'll say, are you from Manipur, Nagaland, or probably are you from some certain part of the world? So we have to explain. So these are the major challenges. And then also, I think younger generation, second and third generation, the concept, the idea of homeland, which is mentioned in this book, was very vivid. And then if this continue for some time, and it's also, I feel it's something which will lead to identity crisis, and which later on leads to the, probably after some time, if this continue, that the concept of Tibetan identity, culture will somehow this should not happen, but maybe cease to exist. So that's what probably one of the major challenges, difficulties we face in Bangalore city as large. So I'm sorry, I think I'm speaking so much. Sir, you wanted to say something others?
Yeah, on the whole, I think on the identity issue, I'm quite optimistic. I think the Tibetan identity is quite strong, and I think because there's something about the Tibetan culture and Tibetan, especially the Tibetan spirituality, for the lack of a better word, I think it's very ingrained in the Tibetan, the psyche. So I think I'm quite optimistic, especially like the Jewish people, the Jewish people, they survived for thousands of years. And I think they primarily did that through preserving their language and religion. So I think the Tibetan people are doing that, especially with all the monasteries and monks and preservation of religion and Buddhism. And so I think in the long run, I think I'm quite optimistic. So even you see a lot of the Himalayan people in India, Himalayan region, the Tibetan-speaking Himalayan region, they're coming to the monasteries to learn about Buddhism and Tibetan language. So they will all help preserve the Tibetan culture and identity. So this is, I think, a very welcome development. So on the whole, I think I'm quite optimistic about it.
Yes. Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
My experience is so nice. Like I went to Bailakuppe, I saw small little monks and going and doing prayers, and also near Hubli there is also a group of people I see, and I meet them in airports. It's good. I mean, we all Indians respect Tibetan people because they are friends.
Yes, sir.
And so that is the message I want to give you. That.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's I remember one story my father used to say. I just share here. My father passed away also, so I don't have both parents. So, but father used to say, always respect cultures, especially the Indian culture. And then also he used to say that, you should have a very good relationship with your host land. And that's not only me, but I think most of the first generations who have came to India have advised or probably advised us, and then that's how the mindset was built up, and that's how the way of thinking was built up, and that's how I think wherever you go across the Tibetan settlements, like Sir said, you're able to see the peaceful coexistence between two communities, and that's what very important for me, I feel. And then the relationship between host land and then probably the refugees played a major role in probably sustaining that ecosystem, that environment for the longer period of time. And that's, sir, what you said is probably we have in most of the Tibetan settlements, you see monasteries, and then most of the people are welcoming because they understand how much Government of India has done to us, probably importance of respecting other cultures. So, and then I think Tibetans also had good sense of hospitality, sir. I think that's what I think also wherever you go across most of the Tibetan settlements, you see these kind of things. So that's what my experience also. I think that's how the mindset was developed from our parents and then still continue. And hopefully this mindset continue for another third, fourth generation also.
Yeah, also now with the Tibetans, they're already here in India for 65 years, you know. Mm-hmm. So I see actually in my community there are some intermarriages, like for instance, you know, the Tibetans getting married to Indians, which is not surprising, you know. It's ought to happen. So I think, and the interesting thing is that when you have a mixed child, they become actually more Tibetan. They become very strong about their Tibetan identity. They become like, you know, very active. So I think this is something that's very interesting. Even in my lane in Dehradun where I live, there are several who are mixed, the Indian Tibetan mixed. So I think this will happen, and this is very healthy, I think.
Yes, sir. Regarding yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious to know that since you have spent so long in India, it's almost like you are Indian now, right? So I'm very curious to know that what is the Indian government doing, or can they do more, to change the status from exile to being like an Indian, how should I say, like how we had Pondicherry, or like a union, I don't know, right? But just in that sense of having an Indian identity that's different from exile. And the second thing I'm curious is, because we're in Bangalore, and Bangalore is known for innovation and IT and startups. So I'm curious whether, in a way to encourage the Tibetan youth or the Tibetan diaspora, like, are they also getting into startup culture? Like, could they bring some really cool, like I know a lot of the young Tibetans are into soccer, or, so some really cool sporting events, or even some very contemporary Tibetan food brands, or, in a way to stay relevant, but also economically kind of, viable. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think this is a great idea, I think. So in Bangalore, I've seen some Tibetans. They're trying out new things, but on the whole, they're still a little bit conservative. They tend to do mostly like cafes. That's the most innovative thing they would do, is like open a restaurant or a cafe. And there's some like little clothing brands I've seen in Delhi, but in terms of technology, I think they haven't really thought about it. I think this definitely should happen. Why not? I think the Tibetans should explore. But one of the most successful cafes in Delhi is owned by a Tibetan. It's called Ama Cafe, and it's ranked as one of the best cafes in India by the Financial Times of London. and it's owned by a Tibetan. And probably the same cafe, Ama Cafe in Dehradun, is also probably the most successful cafe in Dehradun. It's owned by a Tibetan. So basically you have to stand in queue for hours just to get in, to get the coffee, and so there's that's it's something interesting to see,
Thank you, sir. I'll just answer first Government of India part. I really don't know the technical things, but I think Government of India has done lots of to us. I think I can share lists. We'll start from the educational institutions we have, the settlements we have, another one, probably colleges we have. I think one college is where we study, where I teach, Dalai Lama Institute of Higher Education, which is affiliated to Bangalore University. And then we have probably Namgyal Institute, and then the Central Tibetan Administration functioning with the support of Government of India. And then we have Tibetan libraries. And then another one major probably is Tibetan army we have, Chakradar, where I think probably in Bangladesh 1971 happened, the Tibetan army played a major role, but due to many reasons, probably credit was not that much given, but that situation is like that particular period. We can't. And then the liberation of Bangladesh happened, and then Kargil happened. Recently, Doklam happened, where the Tibetan armies fought. In a process, I think we Tibetan and Government of India work together in many ways, and then I think in terms of citizenship, in terms of legality, I think recently the Government of India has passed 2014 Act. In terms of citizenship, I think if you are born in India before 86, you can apply. But many of us, we don't apply. Even I was born before 86, I can apply, but we don't apply. I think the one good example is Chindula. Probably he's the one who carries IC. I think probably I think that's what I'm not saying that I don't want to become a citizen of any country, but I think that's how we maintain, that's how we keep our probably cause alive, and that's how we try to do. And then that's what probably in terms of legality, and what Government of India has done, I can name many other things. I think that's huge. And then in terms of, as Sir said, restaurants. Probably Tibetans a little bit more foodie. And then restaurants is not just a restaurant. If you happen to go to Tibetan restaurants, you see the different interior. You see the picture of Dalai Lama, you see the probably altars, you see the probably paintings of Tibet, the flags which now become very popular, the Omanepemung flags across. So that basically reflects Tibetan culture, Tibetan tradition. And that's how we try to, I think as Madam you said, relevance, right? I think to sustain this course, to maintain relevance is very, very important. And once we are able to maintain relevance, and somehow we are able to sustain. And this Tibetan courses probably has to sustain from generation to generation. And that's, I think this book has written detail on this. So that's also another important. And in terms of younger generations or second, third generation who live in Bangalore city, I think quite of them are also into, I think, innovations, and quite of them are working in good IT sectors. But I think as an individual entrepreneurs, right, I have probably not seen very popular individual entrepreneurs, but definitely in future you might see some Tibetan popular young entrepreneurs emerging from Bangalore. Probably that's what my expectation, and probably that's what I feel that younger generation should working hard to achieve those goals. And that's what, but in a process of this, you have to, that's what my feeling is, to maintain your identity, culture, tradition, belief system together, and then probably go along with the present situation, and that's how we remain relevant. I think the concept, the idea of relevance is very, very important. So these are the, I think that's what my own experience is. Yes, sir.
Hello, thank you for your time today. I just had a question on censorship and freedom of expression. Of course, Tibetans living in China have no ability to speak freely or to write freely. And of course, in India, the Dalai Lama is able to move freely and he's able to meet freely with, foreign governments. I wondered if you could reflect on your ability to speak freely and to write freely within India. Do you feel any pressure to say certain things or to perhaps behave in a certain way to preserve the freedoms that Tibetans have in India? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think so far I personally didn't face any problems in terms of my work, and because my work is mostly, like a memoir, fiction, spirituality, and literary non-fiction. So it's not really very geopolitical, or I'm not talking about the government or politics. And I'm not a very political writer, even though my writing is more quieter. The politics is embedded within the writing, and I don't shout about it. So that's what makes me a very different kind of a Tibetan writer, unlike other writers who take a very explicit political stance. And so I don't actually think about censorship. But if I were in China, of course, it would be incredibly difficult. Yeah.
Firstly, I just wanted to say, Tsering and Ngawang, thank you so much. This is a very insightful session. I must tell you that I'm married to a Tibetan.
Oh.
And so when you were saying that you have Indians who are married to a Tibetan and those Indians who embrace Tibetan culture, I must tell you that I actually think we're 1.4 billion Indians and we need to support a cause of 6 million Tibetans.
Yes, so
my children proudly have Tibetan names and speak fluent Tibetan, and I'm very proud about that. I just wanted to talk also about your point on the role of the monasteries in Bailakuppe, in Mungod, in Dehradun, and the other places. While I think it's clear the exile community is dwindling and fewer people are crossing across from China with what Nepal's doing and blocking people from coming across, I actually think one of the upsides is, and maybe the Tibetan government and CTA should embrace this more, many Ladakhis, many Arunachalis, many Sikkimis, many people from Spiti are coming into these monasteries. So earlier on, when there was no anchor, if the Tibetan exile community didn't come to India, there would be no anchor to blossom the faith. Now that these monasteries are here, you actually have an anchor to blossom the faith and the culture. And unknowingly, you're probably going to spur a growth of the faith more because your community has come here. And as a result, other communities in the Himalayas who follow Tibetan practices, language, culture, habits, religion, they're probably going to blossom as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that, because before that, they really didn't have that anchor, as you said. Now there are a lot of monasteries, and there are a lot of spaces, and there are a lot of great teachers, and there's the language. So all these kids from different parts of the Himalayas, Ladakh, Arunachal, so they can go there and become monks, because the Tibetans these days are not becoming monks now anymore, So otherwise the monasteries will be, empty. So that's a challenge. So luckily we have this huge interest from other parts of India, Himalayan Buddhist areas, so that they become part of the Tibetan diaspora. So this is fantastic, I think.
Yes.
Question about monasteries. How far has this concept of socially engaged Buddhism actually impacted on the monasteries in India? Because, based on my travels, which was many years ago, I felt that in the Tibetan monasteries or in the monasteries in Ladakh, etc., or Lahore and Spiti, it was maybe more of puja and recitation and chanting and stuff. It was more ritualistic, and I don't know if the social dimension of Buddhism was really stressed in the actual training of the monks. But of course, in recent years, you have the emergence of this notion of socially engaged Buddhism. So has that impacted on the monasteries, and is that also part of the curriculum? And are the monks also being, or the novice monks being also taught about the social aspects of Buddhism and how to make it relevant to the contemporary context? Ecology and all these other issues that are of contemporary concern, are they also part of the monastic training curriculum?
Yeah. Yes, it's a very good question, and I think there's something that the monasteries should explore more, so that they're not just they're studying Dharma, and but also going out in the world and making an impact. So the Karmapa, before he left India, he has initiated, particularly in terms of environmental preservation. He has created a lot of these efforts, created societies, organizations, that he asks all the monks from his lineage, which is the Karma Kagyu lineage, to go out and protect the environment, plant trees. And so he has all kinds of activities surrounding ecological preservation, that what you call the socially engaged Buddhism, So I think, but Tibetans, in a way, the way the Tibetans live in the settlements, they live in a very Buddhist, socially engaged way. It's almost like a little Tibet. It's one of the most sustainable ways of living, So I intentionally choose to live in a Tibetan settlement in Dehradun because it gives me an opportunity to live in a very sustainable manner, that I don't have to spend a lot of money, and I have the opportunity to walk around the stupa every day, and then I can just go buy my yogurt and, just buy my sabji, and then, live a very simple way. So it's a kind of sustainable living that Tibetans have created, which is very Buddhist. And then there's the monastery that sort of interacts. So it's a holistic system, so which I think that the world really needs, especially right now. I think this is something that people should learn more.
Hi there, good evening. Thank you so much for what you've shared so far. Really insightful, I think. Just two quick questions, if I could ask. So the first, I think, is as much as I know you speak of having that sense of connection to the homeland, and it also is sort of matched with this desire to feel more Indian and be settled here, how do you reconcile that longing for the homeland within you? I know you're talking of that sensation is lost with subsequent generations, but as those who have vivid memories in some ways, how do you reconcile that there might be this reality where you don't get to experience the homeland, and is there that desire to experience it again? That's the first question. I think the second is, do you find that there is a particular empathy that you think has been cultivated within the community toward other displaced populations that might find themselves within Indian borders, particularly those who don't enjoy actually some of the privileges, the preservation that the Tibetan community seems to enjoy right now, and how does the community sort of grapple even with that there are others within the borders who might not be able to experience this? Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to answer the second question first. I think it's very important that that other displaced communities, they can sort of learn from the Tibetan experience, that how we have managed to maintain our culture and language and religion even after nearly 70 years. So this is not taken to be granted, you know. For instance, the Sikkimis and Bhutias, now they speak Nepalese at home. They don't speak Tibetan. They don't speak their own language. So this is intentionally, you know, planned by the Tibetans who came in India, especially the Dalai Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama. So this doesn't happen automatically. So this is something that other displaced communities can also learn from. So the Tibetans also have the benefit of Buddhism, which makes it not just a tribe, but a civilization, you know. So it's also a living civilization. So we have this heritage, and as I just mentioned earlier, with the monasteries and all that. So this is something that people should learn. And I think in terms of your first question about the longing for the homeland, yeah, I mean, I think writing is a great way of, you know, imagining your homeland, writing about your own experience, writing about your own culture. So I think that is perhaps one of the reasons why I'm writing, is because my Tibet lives through my writing. I'm able to imagine, you know, I'm able to create my homeland through my writing and through a language which is very simple, you know, not a colonial kind of baggage, but which is a very simple breathing language that I can carry the Tibet. And I'm also trying to relearn Tibetan language. I think that's also very beautiful, the Tibetan poetry. So I think I would really recommend the Tibetans who have now grown up in America or Canada, if they had time, they should learn the Tibetan language. So it's not just to reconnect with your homeland, but also it's very therapeutic, I heard. I heard just writing in Tibetan alone, he would make you a saner person. Seriously, so some Tibetan lamas would just recommend writing Tibetan mantras, you know, for people who are really stressed out. So kind of a spiritual practice. So I think learning the language would be a really good start. And I personally want to learn more Tibetan.
Yes, I'll just share a few quickly, sir. Sir said like you're married to a Tibetan woman, so congratulations. And I just wanted to give you some information. I think recently there's a community for Tibetans mix. So that's also something which we also some way in a process encouraged by CT, Central Tibetan Administration. So that's also, and especially your children are able to speak Tibetan language fluently, and that's, I think, most welcome. And then Sir said about monasteries and social engaging. If you go to monasteries nowadays, they have this syllabus. The curriculum setting. If you look at the curriculum settings of schools, they have probably, and if you're able to understand that, you'll be able to understand lots of things about social engaging things that monasteries does, and that's also one thing. Regarding Madam, you said something about belongingness, how you feel this, right? So my own experience I'll share. One of the things is memory. And then memory is, as you said, as passed on from generation to generation, is keep on fading. But one of the major responsibilities we do here is to share our own experience with our children. And that's how we try to sustain memory. And then feel that sense of belongingness, or probably another one is feeling of going back. Whenever we listen to any speeches given by anyone like Sir and all this, like one day, we can go back. One day there will be some sunrise happen where Dalai Lama will be going back to Potala Palace, and this kind of probably explanation or this kind of a feeling gives a sense of belongingness. Another one is probably we Tibetan have this certificate called RC, registration certificate, which every year we have to renew. right? We have to get in a queue, sometimes even not able to renew on a time, probably have to pay certain fines and penalties. So this, I really keep this certificate as a reminder to me, and that's how it gives me, I think, a strong sense of belongingness towards my own community. So I think now the Government of India has made this 5 year, but earlier 1 year, 5 years. So I think that's probably, I think, very good memory for us, or reminder for us that probably one day, sometime in the future, we can go back. So these are the, I think, the common man's probably feeling about a sense of belongingness and how it has intentionally or unintentionally happened. So that's what my experience is. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for your evening. A lot of people forecast that the China population is going to halve in about 100 years. It's going to be half of what it is right now. As a result of which, the chances of a Tibet as a country coming back is probably at its best, probably 50, 70 years from now. In which case, what are the markers of Tibetan society do you think will last until then for us to carry that back into the Tibet when there's a need? Thank you.
Sir, I think probably if you look at the political situation or certain things, demographic scenarios in China, they have implemented this, I think sir knows best, one-child policy, right? And if you look at the Chinese perspective, China is the only country who spent maximum money on internal defense, internal controlling, right? Rest of the country spends money on defending the boundaries. China is the only country who spent probably more on internal control. So basically this shows what I think in future, maybe China will balkanize into, like we have Hong Kong, Taiwan, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Tibet, balkanize into what exactly happened to Soviet Union. And we have to probably wait for that, and hopefully it happens, and then probably Tibet might become independent. And then, sir, you said 50, 60 years, hopefully in 30, down the line, 20, 30 years, and till that we have to preserve our culture, tradition, and that's what I think is important. And that's what I think if you look at probably Armenian diaspora, probably Jewish diaspora, and I think India is a large good example. When India lived under the British if you start from East India Company, 200 years, from Battle of Revolt 1857 to 1947 is 200 years. If you start from the East India Company, India lived under the British for more than 400 years. And India was able to maintain its culture tradition. If you look at Israel, Israel was without country for more than 500, 600 years. And probably a country of Israel was created in 1945. So I think we can learn, adopt lots of things from other countries in a process. And that's what we try to remain relevant, probably preserve a person from our next generation to probably the third, fourth generation. And that's what, but my personal feel is, if you really wanted to preserve culture, tradition, people should remain in India, where the Central Tibetan administration is, where the major Tibetan settlements are here, but we can't stop the people because as a human being, we go for, we always feel that other side is greener. So that's how probably my understanding, sir. Hopefully something like balkanization of China into small pieces country can happen in future, and hopefully it happens. Thank you.
I have a few questions on the governmental side.
Okay, sir.
As far as the Tibetan diaspora in India is concerned, the Dalai Lama, I presume, is the focal point. You have a government in exile in Dharamsala, and the Dalai Lama is like this solidifying figure. The people who have migrated to Canada and to USA and so on, do they also come under this control or they're not? Number one. Number two, this question about Tibet being independent sometime or the other. In Dharamsala, there's tremendous emphasis to maintain your culture. In that, I find that people who deal with Tibetan medicine are also people who deal with astrology. It's a common discipline in Tibetan culture. And from Indian astrologers, seeing the horoscope of China, it is predicted that not in 50, 60 years, but much earlier, that China will also break up, like say Pakistan might break up much earlier, maybe another 2, 3 years' time. But China will also break up, and the first country to come independent is Tibet. Because there's Mongolia, they'll also, because China, only the main part of China is China. The rest of it is all got together. The Uyghur area will also separate, something like that. And we hope, in not too distant a future, that the Tibet will become an independent country. And the third point I wanted to mention was about the soldiery of the Tibetans who are with the Indian forces. I think of all the forces that we have, easily the Tibetan elements in the force, they are the finest, I think, and very suited for high altitude warfare. Extremely suited because of the physique is such. And therefore you saw them the way they were during various, I wouldn't like to mention the various areas where they participated. We still have people into regiments, into battalions, who are doing extremely well, and they're a pride of the Indian Army. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think your first question, I think that the Tibetan diaspora generally comes under the Dharamsala administration, you know. So you see, it's very interesting that the Dalai Lama is no longer the political leader right now. He has taken retirement. So now we have a political leader called Sikyong. So he is constantly on the road, basically. So because it's spread out all over the world, so he's like traveling almost every week. He's meeting with people, explaining his policies, you know, boosting the morale. So his job is very, very, very tough. And what was your second question about the astrology? Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and that they have predicted that China would break up into many territories. I hope it will happen during my lifetime, so that we can all go back and visit, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us something about the literary scene in Tibet today among the Tibetans who are still in Tibet?
It's a very good question. I think there's some writers in Tibet who are very interesting. Some write in Chinese, obviously, because they grew up in China, right? And I haven't, unfortunately, which I regret, that didn't get much opportunity to read the writings from my fellow writers in Tibet. But I think there should be more translations from Tibetan and Chinese into English. And there is one very famous writer called Weser, and she lives in Beijing, and she writes in Chinese. So I read Chinese. But I can read some of her stuff on Facebook that she posts. But she lives under, obviously, censorship, right? Very difficult. And there's another writer called Pema Tsiten. He's better known for his films. He's considered as the leading filmmaker. And yeah, he's a very good short story writer. And I saw, I think many years ago, I was in France, and his books, short stories, are translated into French before my books are published in English. So he's way ahead of time. And unfortunately, he passed away, I think last year. He was only 50 years old. So it's a kind of sad thing.
We have our last question for the evening before we close.
Sorry, I just had one more question. And this is to both of you. I'd like to get both your perspectives on the culture angle. So in India, obviously, we are 1.4 billion people, and though we have so much of culture, none of us, and I think as Indians get younger and younger, carry culture so heavily. Definitely because, there's no imperative. But I'm just curious, as, your unique situation of being in exile, and obviously then the weight to carry the culture and to marry it with religion and language rests very heavily on youth. And sometimes that can also mean, going too inwards. Like for example, us breaking away from our culture has helped a lot of issues with regards to women to come out. Because as you know, traditionally our society was, more, how should I say, more close-minded norms around women or other things. And because we don't carry it too heavy, it's very easy to assimilate with, other languages or to go abroad or technology, all of that. But when culture sometimes rests too heavy, traditions are forced down, and then, so I'm just very curious. I know your situation is so unique, but I'm just very curious, what's the struggle there? Like, is it a good idea for youth to be so closely married to religion and culture, your youth, or is it a better idea to allow your culture to be appropriated by, let's say, the other Himalayan communities or globally in a good way? So I'd love to know your perspective. Yes, and perhaps some of your youth could also comment on, love to know their perspectives. Yeah.
I think it's very difficult to talk about culture, because whatever you say, the opposite is also true, because culture is such a fluid thing. And so I think one example is there are Tibetans who, kind of go against become more modern, but then they say they're modern, but in the way they behave, the way they do things, they're still very Tibetan. They may not say they're Buddhists, they say I am against the monks and the lamas, but they are fundamentally very Buddhist people. So I think this will continue. So I think I would love to hear more of your people's opinion from other people, if you have any. I don't have any answer really. It's really such a fluid thing, right?
My experience on, as you mentioned, so it seems to be like the way I express, it seems to be like embossing, or seems to be I'm carrying a heavy burden. No, but I think it's in some way, as sir mentioned, the culture should evolve. And when culture becomes stagnant, and evolve in the sense the basic fundamentals remain same. Otherwise, we Tibetans wear a very in high attitude, like we wear a different kind of clothing. And if you come to South India, we wear that, we can't survive, right? But I think we have to, that's what it's all about, navigating. I think the process of navigation, maintaining your own identity and evolving with the time, and then changing with the time, but maintaining the basic fundamentals of your culture, tradition, and that is, I think it's important. Otherwise, if you try to assess it, it has to be fluid. Otherwise, if it remains stagnant, and I think my own understanding is there will be no growth, and then culture has to be grow. But the basic fundamentals, the understanding of our culture, tradition, belief should remain, and that's maybe a kind of my own understanding, might be wrong, a kind of a parameter, and within this, the culture should flourish. Otherwise, if you don't have a basic things, and then what happened here is in a process, the why we came to India, probably the aims and objective of, I think also, that's one not only, and we Tibetan has extra responsibility, especially in outside China. Way back, if you try to understand, go back Tibet, right? They don't have a freedom to carry an image of Dalai Lama. right? They don't have a freedom to practice their religion. They don't have probably now compulsory boarding school was started. And now we carry this responsibility, like we have a 6 million, and then population of Bangalore city is 10 million. Even if you include migrant, all this, like 10, 15 million goes. Entire population of Tibetan can at max goes to 7 million. So in diaspora as a large, I think we have 150,000, max 2 lakh. So we have extra responsibility to preserve those culture. That's what exactly you see in Tibet, you see replica in India. Like monasteries we have in Tibet, and same replica you see in India. Like Sera, Debung, Kante, we have in Tibet, and we have same in India. If you study Central Tibetan administration in detail, right, we are just doing rehearsal in here, right? When we go back, we have a system intact, and that's not probably kind of a dictator, that's democratic. And His Holiness Dalai Lama has probably voluntarily give up his, and now we have elected leader. So elections are conducted, and that's what, if you look at also the Tibetan charter, we call them as charter, that's what, in a sense, like, it's like a constitution for us. It's not, we can't say a constitution because it can't be technically. Right? So we call them as charter. If you read those charters, what basically we try to do here is democracy required in 3 major pillars we have in Dharamsala. So we are trying to do some kind of rehearsal here, and as Sir said, his astrology will come, hopefully will come true, and within 20, 30 years we'll be able to go back, and whatever we have rehearsed in India, like we have created replicas and all this basically, and we are able to go back and then raise civilization in Tibet, and that's what I think one of the major visions of His Holiness and the Tibetan as a large. So that's my, I think, probably understanding. Thank you.
On behalf of BIC, I'd like to thank Mr. Tsering and Mr. Ngawang for bringing this session to our platform. Thank you, the audience, for your time. And we would like to hear your thoughts on the session. So there's a QR code outside, linked to a feedback form. And we also have the book signing taking place outside the gallery. In about 5 minutes, we'll begin. Good night and thank you again.